looked at her husband, and then stood up, saying, "Then I'll take Tindy out for a walk. Call me when you're done." Henry Black quickly said, "All right, but don't wander too far." Cindy Lee nodded approvingly. "Indeed, your wife is wise." Once she left, Cindy Lee said, "You must immediately go and pay respects at the ancestral shrine of your wife's family, asking for their blessings to improve your career luck." Henry Black was puzzled, so Cindy Lee whispered, "I just mentioned that the Williams family is being pursued by Leonard Stone. Right now, they, along with William Blade's junior disciple, Philip Gale, are trapped in the ancestral hall of the Wu family in the northeast part of Luoyang City. We must find a way to rescue them." Henry Black was shocked and asked, "How many are trapped? Who are they? Do they know martial arts?" Cindy Lee replied, "I'm not entirely sure about the details. One of them is Philip Gale, the junior disciple of Minister Blade William Blade from Manhwa. His martial arts are not weak, but the Wu family's ancestral hall is guarded by the imperial guards. Furthermore, Leonard Stone has stationed a group of clerks outside to monitor suspicious individuals entering or leaving. Right now, you're the most suitable person to visit the shrine." Henry Black said, "But it's already afternoon. Isn't it inappropriate to pay respects to ancestors at this time?" Cindy Lee answered, "Whether it's appropriate or not, it's my call. It's best if you bring several trustworthy people, preferably servants from your father-in-law's household." Henry Black sighed. "Looks like I'll have to return to the martial world again." Cindy Lee said, "There's no other way. After all, we are people of the martial world. Hurry and get ready. The sooner, the better. I'll accompany you with William Blade to rescue them." Henry Black replied, "With Minister Blade and you leading, I feel much more reassured." Cindy Lee deliberately spoke loudly. "This must be done quickly. If you miss today's opportunity, the Wu family's ancestors will no longer bless you." With that, he stood up and left. At the door, he told Elizabeth, "If your husband follows my advice, he will surely be promoted and prosper." Elizabeth quickly thanked him, then went inside and asked, "What did the fortune teller say?" Henry Black paid for the tea and replied, "The fortune teller wants us to pay respects to your ancestors today." Elizabeth, upon hearing the news, was overjoyed. The entire family immediately returned to Robert Queen's residence, explained the situation to her father-in-law, and instructed the servants to prepare incense, candles, sacrificial offerings, and other ceremonial items. After hearing the details, Robert Queen said, "Your intention to honor the Wu family ancestors shows your filial piety and loyalty, but there's no need to rush. You can go tomorrow as well." Elizabeth replied, "The fortune teller said this matter should not be delayed. Otherwise, the ancestors will no longer bless my husband." Robert Queen said, "I have some matters to attend to and cannot accompany you. Instead, let someone, Elizabeth Wu's younger brother, go with you." Henry Black responded, "That works. In that case, I'll trouble you, father-in-law, to arrange it. Does my brother-in-law have time?" Robert Queen replied, "He only needs to cut short his outings for half a day, and he'll have time." With that, he instructed the servants to summon his son back home. Once the servants had prepared the sacrificial items, Wu Sungwon hurried back. Upon hearing that he had to accompany them to pay respects to the Wu family ancestors, he seemed reluctant but was forced to comply by his father. The group, traveling in 2 horse-drawn carriages, departed for the Wu family ancestral hall. Henry Black deliberately sat at the front carriage door, observing the surroundings along the way. They soon arrived outside the Wu family ancestral hall, only to find many minor officials guarding the area. A thin man appeared to be commanding them to maintain strict surveillance. Henry Black immediately instructed the coachman to halt the carriage. He stepped down and sternly questioned, "Who are you? What are you doing in front of my Wu family ancestral hall?" The thin man, staring at him suspiciously, asked in return, "And who are you?" Henry Black replied, "I am the son-in-law of the esteemed Robert Queen, Henry Black. I've come here specifically to pay respects to the Wu family ancestors." "Who are you?" The thin man quickly responded, "I am Leonard Stone, a guerrilla general here to investigate traitors." At that moment, Wu Sung-won poked his head out of the carriage and shouted, "What's going on? Why haven't we entered yet? Why the delay?" Henry Black hurriedly turned back and said, "Up ahead is Leonard Stone, investigating traitors. He won't let us pass." Hearing this, Wu Sung-won angrily jumped off the carriage, strode forward, and demanded, "Who does this guy think he is?" Leonard Stone, upon seeing him, though not very familiar, could guess from his attire and accessories that he was a descendant of the Wu. He hurriedly clasped his hands in greeting. "I am Leonard Stone, paying respects to young Master Wu." Wu Sung-won immediately grabbed his collar, slapped him hard, and angrily shouted, "You, like a blind dog, dare block my way without even looking properly." Leonard Stone, both terrified and furious, dared not retaliate. His subordinates, seeing this, quickly gathered around. Wu Sung-won fiercely declared, "This young master is here. Let's see who dares to step forward." Henry Black added, "This is none other than the nephew of Victoria Wu, Lord Wu Sung-won. If you wish to enter Illumination Prison, go ahead and try." The clerks, hearing this, looked fearfully toward their master. Leonard Stone, groveling and pleading, said, "I was blind and ignorant. I beg young Master Wu for mercy." At this moment, the imperial guard stationed at the Wu ancestral shrine also gathered to watch the commotion. From the nearby woods, a shadow quickly darted out and slipped under Henry Black's carriage. Henry Black immediately understood it was the master and William Blade. He then said, "Sung-won, let it go. Lord Stone is merely following orders. Time is running out. Let us proceed with the worship." Wu Sung-won pushed Leonard Stone aside and returned to the carriage. Henry Black instructed the coachman to drive into the Wu ancestral shrine. Leonard Stone watched them leave and immediately called one of his subordinates, whispering a few words. The subordinate hurriedly ran off. Inside the shrine, Henry Black helped his wife down from the carriage, instructed the servants to place the sacrificial offerings on the altar, and began the worship ceremony. Meanwhile, William Blade, Cindy Lee, and Anna took advantage of the chaos to sneak into the shrine and headed straight to the forest of steels at the back. This forest of steels, commissioned by Empress Wu, bore the names of her ancestors and was erected in an open area behind the shrine, forming a tomb-like structure. Philip Gale was hiding there with Edward Williams' family. Upon seeing people entering, they became highly alert but relaxed upon recognizing senior brother William Blade. They quietly called them over. Cindy Lee counted 8 people in total, 4 men and 4 women. William Blade said, "We cannot stay here long. If not, Leonard Stone will inform Robert Rising's superior, Arthur Queen, to send people here to search." Cindy Lee suggested, "Let the Williams family leave first." Anna added, "As long as they can escape my superior, the Right Assistant Minister Williams, will provide support outside." Cindy Lee said, "Prepare yourselves. I will inform my disciple. Be ready to leave." He then snuck back into the shrine and called Henry Black aside, whispering, "There are 4 people who need to leave. None of them know martial arts. Find a way to get them out." Henry Black nodded in agreement and said, "Tell them to act according to the situation." After speaking, he returned to the spirit tablet of the Wu and said, "It seems this place hasn't been cleaned for a long time. It's too dirty. Come, let's clean it up a bit together." He then took off his outer coat, placed it on the cushion, and said to his wife and sister-in-law, "You two should go rest in the adjacent room for a while. Once we're done cleaning, I'll call for you." Wu someone replied. Brother-in-law is so considerate. Then I'll trouble you for this. The servants followed his lead, removing their outer coats and grabbing brooms to start cleaning. Cindy Lee led the Williams couple and their family into the ancestral hall. He put on Henry Black's coat and, taking advantage of the servants' distraction, went to the carriage in the courtyard. He said to the coachman, Master Black wants me to take them to buy additional offerings for the ritual, as the ones we brought earlier aren't good enough. The coachman immediately agreed. Henry Black also stepped out, giving way for the Williams family to board the carriage. He led the way ahead and said at the door, Go quickly and return fast. I'm still waiting to use it. Kenneth Lee hurriedly replied. Leonard Stone, noticing this, wanted to order someone to search the carriage, but the junior officer from earlier quickly stepped forward and whispered, I have thoroughly inspected it. Inside are the daughter, son-in-law, and young master of Lord Robert Queen. Leonard Stone quickly nodded in acknowledgement to Henry Black. Henry Black then added, These servants really don't know how to do their jobs. They actually dared to use the sacrificial offerings from yesterday. Luckily, I caught it in time. Otherwise, if the Wu family ancestors found out, they would surely blame me. Lord Stone, don't you agree? Hearing this, Leonard Stone nodded in agreement, ordered the junior officer to step aside and clear the way, and allowed the carriage to pass. Chapter 15 Clever Escape. On the afternoon of the Qingming Festival, in front of the Wu family ancestral hall located in the northeast of Luoyang, Henry Black used the excuse of purchasing new sacrificial offerings for the ancestors. He instructed Kenneth Lee, the carriage driver, to help the Williams family evade Leonard Stone's inspection and escape from the Wu ancestral hall. After the carriage had left, Leonard Stone felt uneasy, sensing something was amiss. He called over a junior officer and asked, Why wasn't Lord Black wearing his outer robe? And why does that carriage driver seem unfamiliar to me? The junior officer, named Smarty, was clever as his name suggested. He was originally a student at a private school, but had secretly reported his teacher for sympathizing with Willow's plight. His letter of accusation led to the teacher's arrest, and Smarty earned credit for his denunciation, subsequently becoming a junior officer under Leonard Stone. Smarty replied, Could there be someone hidden in that carriage? Leonard Stone nodded and said, That's possible. However, Lord Black was present just now, so it wasn't convenient for me to inspect it. Now, take a few men and chase after that carriage. If you find any fugitives wanted by the court hiding inside, blow the whistle for reinforcements immediately. He then handed Smarty a bone whistle. Smarty promptly gathered a few ruthless officers and mounted horses to pursue the departing carriage. Henry Black returned to the ancestral hall and instructed the servants to continue cleaning. He entered an adjacent room and said to Wu Sungwan and Elizabeth, The cleaning is done. We can leave now, but I will leave some servants behind to guard the ancestral tablets. Wu Sungwan immediately questioned, Didn't the court already assign people to guard the ancestral hall? Henry Black replied, Those are outsiders. They can't be trusted. I want to leave my own people here for a while to demonstrate our descendants' respect and devotion to the Wu family ancestors. Wu Sungwan said, Brother-in-law, you are truly thoughtful. Is the ceremony complete? I still have other matters to attend to. Henry Black responded, Then let's leave now. After speaking, he immediately called his wife and children, walked out to the main hall, and said to the servants who were cleaning, You all continue cleaning. Young Master Wu has other matters and left early. Once you finish cleaning, stay here and guard for one night, then return tomorrow. Although the servants did not understand why they had to stay overnight, they dared not ask. Upon reaching the courtyard, Wu Sungwan suspiciously asked, Why is there a carriage missing? Henry Black replied, The servants didn't prepare enough supplies, so I sent someone to buy more. They'll be back soon. You all go ahead first, Elizabeth asked. Husband, aren't you coming back with us? Henry Black said. I'll wait a little longer. Once the supplies arrive and the fresh offerings are arranged, I'll return. After speaking, he helped his wife into the carriage. Wu Someone also got into the carriage and said, Then we'll head back first. I'll leave this place in your care, brother-in-law. Henry Black waved his hand, signaling them to leave. Once they had departed, Henry Black immediately returned to the Forest of Steels to meet with William Blade and discuss the next steps. Wu Sungwan, riding the carriage away from the Wu ancestral temple, encountered Leonard Stone at the gate. Leonard, still doubtful, saw another carriage leaving and boldly stepped forward to inquire. Wu Sungwan lifted the curtain of the carriage, causing Leonard Stone to step back in fear with an awkward laugh. Cindy Lee, driving the first carriage, quickly headed for the eastern city gate, but was intercepted by Smarty and his men. Cindy Lee questioned angrily, Who are you? Do you not see that this is the carriage of Lord Wu's residence, yet you dare to stop it? Smarty coldly replied, I suspect that you're hiding a criminal of the court inside this carriage. A search is necessary. He then ordered his subordinates to approach and inspect. Cindy Lee, furious, stepped down from the carriage, her face darkening even further. She stood aside as Smarty lifted the front curtain, only to find the inside empty. Growing suspicious, he even crawled under the carriage to check the underside, but everything appeared normal, and no one was hiding. Cindy Lee angrily retorted, You dare search even Lord Wu's carriage? I will report this to Lord Wu. What is your name? Smarty quickly replied, It's a misunderstanding, just a misunderstanding. Cindy Lee got back into the carriage and turned back toward the Wu ancestral temple. As it turned out, along the way, Cindy Lee had already guessed that Leonard Stone would send someone to chase and inspect the carriage. He quickly had the Williams family get off and meet Emily Williams, who was waiting nearby. Intentionally, he led Smarty and his men far away. By the time Cindy Lee returned to the Wu ancestral temple, Smarty had already returned with his subordinates. Seeing Cindy Lee, they had no choice but to let him in. Henry Black sent the servants to rest in a room, then had the two brothers, William Blade, board the carriage with him. Personally taking the reins, he drove everyone away from the Wu ancestral temple. By now, the sky was beginning to darken. Leonard Stone felt something was amiss. After Henry Black's carriage disappeared from sight, he immediately led his men into the ancestral temple to investigate. However, they only found the servants of the Wu residence guarding the place for the night. Even after searching the entire area, including the steel forest behind, they returned empty-handed. Muttering to himself, Leonard said, Could we have been mistaken, or did they sprout wings and fly away? Smarty quickly added, There must be something wrong with Henry Black's carriage. Leonard Stone replied, Obviously, but is it too late to chase after them now? He reluctantly led his men back to Robert Rising's residence to report. In the Ministry of Justice's prison, the Williams family was finally reunited. Edward Williams said, Thank you all for saving us. If not, our entire family would have been sent to the execution grounds. William Blade said, We are still in the capital. We must find a way to leave here. Charles Justice encountered Miss Williams again, feeling a myriad of emotions. Edward Williams remarked, Young man, it seems your thoughts are not wrong. In these chaotic times, reading books does no good. Only learning martial arts can ensure survival. William Blade and his junior brother sought Cindy Lee to discuss plans for leaving the city. Emily Williams had to leave with Anna for some matters, but promised to return the next morning. Meanwhile, Edward Williams and his wife went to check on their son's injuries. Charles Justice looked at Miss Williams, who still appeared frightened, her clothes disheveled and said, I heard that you were taken by Leonard Stone. I swore to rescue you, but unfortunately, I arrived too late. I didn't meet Lady Williams, and instead, I was captured by the villains. Miss Williams, looking exhausted and with her garments dirted, replied, Thank you for your kindness. I hope this hasn't caused trouble for Mr. Thoy? Charles Justice, feeling a pang of sorrow, responded, Senior Thoy has gone to West Mountain to deliver the coffin to Master Lee and cannot return for the time being. Lily Carter, noticing his concern, said, My lady is still shaken. Let her rest for now. Charles Justice nodded in agreement. Henry Black returned to Robert Queen's residence, where his father-in-law immediately approached him and said, 5 of your former subordinates have been captured by Robert Rising's men and are now imprisoned in the city jail. Henry Black, startled, asked, What crimes have they committed? Robert Queen replied, Don't be agitated, my son-in-law. Victoria Queen personally met the 5 tigers of Luoyang. Her intention is that if these 5 can be utilized by Robert Rising, not only will the court spare their lives, but they will also be granted official positions. What do you think? Henry Black said, But they are my subordinates. Why should they obey Robert Rising's orders? Robert Queen explained, Currently, Victoria aims to gather intelligence and eliminate rebels. With corrupt officials running rampant, your 5 tigers are well suited to serve as minor officials to capture criminals. There are many talents in this world. Even if you lose the 5 tigers of Luoyang now, perhaps in the future, the Great Tang's 5 tigers will come to your aid. Henry Black replied, Then I must meet with them first. Otherwise, I absolutely will not agree. Robert Queen said, Do you still have the right to bargain now? For the sake of my daughter, you must learn to let go. Only then can you preserve your power. Henry Black nodded in agreement and said, I want to meet the 5 tigers right now. I hope father-in-law can assist me. Robert Queen nodded in response and said, Then I will accompany you on a trip to Illumination Prison. The father-in-law and son-in-law boarded a carriage and traveled overnight to Illumination Prison. The guards, seeing Lord Queen, hurriedly invited them in. Inside the prison, the air was thick with the stench of blood, and the anguished cries of prisoners echoed incessantly. Henry Black remarked, Father-in-law, I fear that even innocent people here are being tortured into guilt. Robert Queen replied, Do not speak nonsense. Robert Rising, the prison warden, upon hearing that Robert Queen had arrived at Illumination Prison, hurried out to greet him and invited him into his office, ordering tea to be served for the 2 guests. Henry Black took a sip of tea and commented, This tea smells like blood. Robert Rising quickly explained, I am merely following Victoria's orders to serve the court. Robert Queen said, You know why we are here. Bring those 5 men here immediately. Robert Rising hastily replied, Yes, my lords, please wait a moment. He then ordered his subordinates to bring the 5 tigers of Luoyang forward. The 5 men arrived, each bearing injuries, but maintaining resolute expressions. Henry Black furiously exclaimed, How dare you coerce my subordinates? Robert Rising quickly defended himself, saying, Lord Black, you wrong me. Victoria explicitly instructed me not to use torture on these 5. Their injuries were sustained during their capture. The 5 tigers of Luoyang cupped their hands in salute and said in unison, We greet Lord Black. Henry Black asked, Is what Robert Rising said true? Meng Yuan replied, Yes, Robert Rising did not use torture on us. Robert Rising finally breathed a sigh of relief. Robert Queen said, Enough talking. Now that you've seen them, can we leave? He covered his nose with a handkerchief. Henry Black said, Victoria wants you to submit and follow Lord Rising's orders. The 5 tigers were shocked upon hearing this and responded in unison, No, we will only follow Lord Black's orders. Robert Rising hurriedly explained, It is not my intention to take Lord Black's subordinates. This is Victoria's command. Henry Black raised his head and said, since it's Victoria's wish, I won't say much more. However, these 5 are ignorant and slow-witted. Keeping them here might cause trouble for Lord Rising. Robert Rising quickly responded, it's all right, it's all right. I will certainly make good use of them. The 5 tigers retorted, ah, we are the 5 tigers of Luoyang. We won't be your lackeys, doing immoral and unjust deeds. Robert Rising looked troubled, and Robert Queen was visibly embarrassed. Henry Black quickly interjected, let me persuade them. Lord Rising, is there a quiet place around here? Robert Rising promptly replied, Lord Black and esteemed heroes, please follow me. He then led them to a special prison cell used for detaining criminals. Although the room had an unpleasant odor, it was furnished with tables and chairs. Robert Rising gestured for Henry Black to proceed, and then excused himself. Henry Black invited the 5 tigers to sit and talk. Manhwa, the leader of the 5 tigers, spoke first. Lord Black, we've troubled you. We are useless, having been captured by the imperial lackeys. Henry Black replied, this is not your fault. I've already met with our master, and his wishes for me to find a way to save you. The 5 tigers were overjoyed upon hearing this. Henry Black continued, currently, the world is in chaos, with treacherous officials running rampant, villains thriving, and opportunists everywhere. You 5 possess righteous hearts and upright morals, but to deal with these cruel officials, I hope you can remain here. The 5 tigers were puzzled. Henry Black lowered his voice and explained, though I cannot yet oppose Victoria, we must preserve our strength. I need you to stay here as insiders. When I grow stronger, I'll rely on you to act as spies. By then, dealing with these treacherous officials will be as easy as turning a hand. The 5 tigers fell into deep thought. Henry Black added, this is only the beginning of the darkness. The road ahead is long. After discussing among themselves, the 5 tigers said, we can stay, but we won't do anything that goes against our conscience. Henry Black replied, a true man knows when to bend and when to stand tall. There may be things you'll have to do while in this position, but as long as we don't lose sight of our true selves, it will be worth it. Lowering his voice further, Henry Black reassured them, I believe that with my efforts and our master's guidance, we'll soon build a force capable of opposing the corrupt officials of the court. At that time, we'll be the righteous force in the martial world. Rest assured, once I've stabilized, I'll immediately move your families to a safe place. Hearing this, the 5 tigers felt completely at ease and asked, how will we communicate in the future? Henry Black whispered, I'll use the Phantom Enchanted Forest symbol to contact you. He then dipped his finger in tea and drew a circle on the table with 3 smaller circles inside it. The 5 tigers observed and immediately wiped it away with their sleeves. At that moment, Robert Rising entered and said, I wonder if Lord Black and the 5 heroes have finished their discussion. Lord Wu is growing impatient. Henry Black stood up and said, I have convinced them. From now on, they will follow the command of Master Rising. Hearing this, Robert Rising was overjoyed and quickly looked at the 5 tigers. The 5 tigers simultaneously clasped their hands and said, we are willing to follow the orders of Master Rising. Henry Black said, if any of them make mistakes while working, I hope Master Rising will be lenient and forgiving. However, if they truly commit a major error, you don't need to spare them on my account. Punish them as they deserve. In reality, he meant the opposite, and both the 5 tigers and Robert Rising naturally understood this. Henry Black then took his leave. Robert Rising hurriedly escorted him to meet Robert Queen. The father and son left the prison and returned to the mansion by carriage. In the middle of the night, Henry Black was awakened by the soft call of a cuckoo bird. He immediately understood that his master was seeking him. He quickly got up, pretending to go to the bathroom, threw on a coat, and stepped outside. From a roof not far away, he spotted a faint ghostly light. He hurried over, but at that moment, a cold voice asked, "Where are you going?" Chapter 16, Episode 16, Escaping the Prison. In the middle of the night, Henry Black heard his master calling for him, so he got up and went to the courtyard, only to be stopped by someone asking where he was going. Henry Black quickly turned around and saw his father-in-law standing behind him, coldly staring at him. Henry Black hastily replied, "Father-in-law, you're still awake at this hour? I just woke up and couldn't sleep, so I came out for a walk." Robert Queen said, "Are you still troubled by the matter of the 5 tigers of Luoyang?" Henry Black replied, "Yes, although I have convinced the 5 tigers, I fear they might not accomplish the tasks Master Rising expects of them." Robert Queen said, "You don't need to worry about that. Victoria wouldn't misjudge people. The 5 tigers of Luoyang have potential. You should focus on your own future instead. Do you plan to stay in the capital, or do you want to serve elsewhere?" Henry Black said, "Although the capital is prosperous, my position is unique, and I don't wish to stay here. I hope father-in-law can speak to Victoria on my behalf to request a small official post, just enough to make a living." Robert Queen nodded in agreement and said, "All right, then rest early. I'll speak with Victoria about your wishes tomorrow." Henry Black thanked his father-in-law and invited him to rest as well. After Robert Queen left, Henry quickly looked toward the spot where the ghostly light had appeared earlier. It was still there, though much dimmer. He checked his surroundings to ensure no one was watching, then leapt onto the roof, crouching low. In a hushed voice he said, "Sugui." A faint reply came from nearby, "Blood sacrifice." Hearing the matching signal, Henry Black whispered, "Master, is it you?" Kenneth Lee nodded and said, "You did well during the day. The person has been rescued, but they cannot leave the city yet. You still need to find a way." Henry Black nodded in agreement. Kenneth Lee then asked, "How are the 5 tigers of Luoyang?" Henry Black replied, "I've met them, and Victoria has also met them. I want to leave them at Arthur Queen's place to act as our informants." Kenneth Lee was slightly surprised upon hearing this and said, "You're becoming more and more seasoned. It seems like you have a plan. Tell me about it." Henry Black said, "Right now, Victoria Queen is riding high with momentum. We can only temporarily retreat. I plan to go far from the capital to recuperate and gather strength. Once our forces are strong enough, we will launch a counterattack." Kenneth Lee nodded in agreement and said, "That works. You will act openly, and I will work in the shadows. I'll contact the heroes of the martial world and other princes to assist you." The master and disciple then parted ways one after another. Early the next morning, William Blade and Kenneth Lee went to find Stevie Danielson, the official in charge of the Ministry of Justice, to discuss rescuing the Williams family from the city. Stevie Danielson said, "In the past 2 days, spies and minor officials from the oppressive regime have been stationed at all the city gates of Luoyang. It will be very difficult to sneak out of the city." William Blade responded, "Then we need to come up with another plan." Stevie Danielson added, "Charles Justice from the Imperial Academy is not wanted by the court, and neither is the maid Lily Carter. They can change their clothes and leave on their own. There shouldn't be any issues." Kenneth Lee agreed, "That's true. This matter doesn't concern them." When Lily Carter and Charles Justice heard they could leave, they were somewhat reluctant. Philip Gale said, "What? Do you actually like this place? If you're told to leave, then go quickly." Charles Justice hurriedly replied, "I just—" Lily Carter interjected, "You just can't bear to leave my lady, can you?" Charles Justice nodded in acknowledgement. Miss Williams then said, "You should leave first. You're a good person, but I already have a marriage arrangement with Master Loy. Take Lily Carter with you as well. The farther you go from the capital, the better. Lily Carter protested. No, my lady. I won't leave you. I want to stay by your side and serve you always. Charles Justice also said. Yes, I cannot abandon you all. Ethan Williams replied. No, what the senior means is that we are too many, making us easy to notice, so we must split up to leave the city. Philip Gale added. That's correct. You should leave the capital first. We will find a way to safely escort the Williams family out of the capital. Right now, Robert Rising is hunting us aggressively. If you can escape first, then do so. Charles Justice had no choice but to nod in agreement. He and Lily Carter changed into clean clothes and, under the guidance of Old Ha, left the Ministry of Justice with Stevie Danielson. With Stevie Danielson's protection, the two successfully avoided the watchful eyes of the officers. Charles Justice said, I have a servant at the Imperial Academy. I want to check on him. Stevie Danielson agreed, saying, Then go quickly and return quickly. If you still wish to stay at the Imperial Academy, that's fine too. Charles Justice replied, No, I have decided to leave the capital. He hurried to the Imperial Academy and found Peter Justice still there, waiting for him in distress. The other senior students were comforting him. Seeing his master return, Peter couldn't help but shed tears of relief. George Ceremony, hearing of his return, rushed over to ask what had happened. Charles Justice explained, The Williams family has been accused, and I'm afraid Senior Loy will also be implicated. This time, I've returned to take Peter Justice and leave the capital. George Ceremony remarked, These are truly frightening times. Leaving the capital is a wise choice. Charles Justice quickly instructed Peter Justice to pack his belongings. George Ceremony said, The city gates are under strict surveillance right now. Do you have a way to leave? Charles Justice nodded and replied, After leaving the capital, I plan to find a master to learn martial arts. George Ceremony said, I have written a letter for Victor Grace. Please deliver it to him and ask him to take refuge outside for a while. Once things settle down, he can return to the Imperial Academy. Charles Justice agreed, took the letter, called Peter Justice, and bid farewell to Lord Wing and the senior students. The master and servant left the Imperial Academy, found Stevie Danielson, and disguised themselves as servants of Lord Danielson to leave Luoyang City with him. Upon reaching the outskirts of Jintu Jian, Stevie Danielson said, I can only escort you this far. You can wait here for William Blade and the others or head to Manhwa on your own, but be careful. Charles Justice and Lily Carter thanked him, and Stevie Danielson returned to the capital. Seeing Charles Justice looking unsure, Lily Carter said, Why don't we head towards Manhwa while waiting to reunite with the young lady and the others? Charles Justice nodded and said, That works. Right now, I don't even know the way to Manhwa. Lily Carter said, Let's follow the main road. They are moving quickly and will surely catch up with us. The three of them then followed the main road heading west. Early in the morning, Henry Black was taken by his father-in-law, Robert Queen, to the royal palace to meet Victoria and present his intentions. The Empress Wu said, All right, if you don't want to stay in the capital to work, then I will assign you to Wusong as a supervisor. The position of supervisor was a leisurely role, not very powerful, but with a salary equivalent to that of a provincial governor, and it allowed for freedom of movement. Henry Black quickly expressed his gratitude to Victoria. After leaving the palace, Henry Black said, I haven't been back to the capital for a long time, so I'd like to go outside the city for a little stroll. Robert Queen responded, Recently, the capital has been rigorously investigating rebels. You'd better stay safe within the residence. Henry Black replied, While it's safe in the residence, it's also too dull. Now it's the beautiful month of April. We'd like to go outside the city and enjoy the spring, Robert Queen said. You young ones only think about having fun. Fine, go ahead then, Henry Black added. To avoid being stopped and questioned by minor officials, I'd kindly ask my father-in-law to write us a travel permit, Robert Queen said. That's no problem. The two returned to the residence, where Henry Black called for his wife, received the travel permit written by his father-in-law, and then boarded the carriage to leave the residence. Robert Queen reminded them to return early. When they reached the Ministry of Justice's gate, Henry Black deliberately leaned out and winked at Cindy Lee, who was standing at the door. He then continued driving the carriage toward the Supreme Judicial Court. Cindy Lee understood the signal and planned to meet him at the Supreme Judicial Court's entrance. At the Supreme Judicial Court's gate, Henry Black stopped the carriage. Elizabeth, confused, asked, "Husband, why are we stopping here?" Henry Black replied, "I want to meet some old colleagues. You can wait in the carriage for a moment. I'll be back shortly." With that, he got off the carriage. At this time, Cindy Lee also arrived, bringing the Williams family disguised as guards and attendants, stationed around the carriage. Henry Black entered the Supreme Judicial Court, met with Jie Xian Quan and Chui Di, and also paid his respects to his former superior, Lu Zhengdao. After exchanging a few words, he took his leave. At the gate, seeing everyone assembled, he understood the situation, got on the carriage, and said to his wife, "My old colleagues are really nostalgic. They've sent people to accompany us out of the city, ostensibly to protect us, but in reality, they just want to have some fun outside." Elizabeth quickly lifted the curtain and looked outside, noticing the additional guards and attendants. She nodded and greeted them. William Blade was disguised as an attendant, while Philip Gale, Cindy Lee, and Ethan Williams, along with his son, were disguised as guards. Only Sarah Williams and her daughter were invited by Henry Black to ride in the carriage. He introduced them to his wife, saying, "These two are family members of the Ministry of Justice's chief clerk. They will join us for a stroll outside the city." Afterward, Edward Williams drove the carriage, with Henry Black sitting beside him. At the west gate of Luoyang City, numerous minor officials and soldiers were guarding the entrance, strictly interrogating those entering and leaving the capital. Henry Black hurriedly instructed Edward Williams to wear a straw hat, then pulled out a travel permit, loudly saying, "It's getting late. Let's hurry up. We need to return soon." Philip Gale quickly took the travel permit and handed it over to the minor official for inspection. The minor official scrutinized the permit carefully and then asked, "Who is inside the carriage?" Philip Gale promptly replied, "This is the family of Lord Black." The minor official said, "By order of our superiors, we must inspect those inside the carriage." Cindy Lee immediately stepped forward and gave the minor official a slap, angrily exclaiming, "How dare you even think of inspecting the daughter of Lord Robert Queen?" The minor official, stunned by the slap, held his face with a frightened expression. Henry Black intervened, saying, "Do not act recklessly. This officer is simply following orders, and should not be made to suffer. I will ask my wife to step out for inspection." The minor official hastily responded, "I wouldn't dare." Henry Black then lifted the curtain and said, "Madam, the gate guards need to inspect. Please step out and show yourself." Elizabeth leaned out of the carriage. Although the minor officials had never seen her before, they noticed the travel permit issued by Robert Queen and observed the accompanying guards. They quickly allowed them to pass. Henry Black secretly breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Good. What is your name? I will speak well of you to your superiors." The minor official quickly replied, "This humble one is named Negan. I apologize for troubling you, Lord Black." Henry Black said, "Negan, you are very diligent in your duties. I will recommend you to Lord Queen's. Hearing this, the minor official was overjoyed and immediately saw them off as they exited Luoyang City. Henry Black then drove the carriage swiftly toward Justin Simple. William Blade and his companions quickly left the carriage once outside the town, spent money to buy horses, and purchased another carriage. They chased ahead and found the carriage by the riverbank. Lady Williams expressed her gratitude to Elizabeth, and Henry Black, accompanied by his wife, followed the small river southward. At this moment, the willow trees along the river were lush and green, and the river water rippled gently. Elizabeth remarked, "Why don't they join us for the excursion?" Henry Black replied, "They have gone elsewhere for their trip. I plan to leave the capital. Victoria has appointed me as the Wusong inspector. We are heading south soon." Elizabeth asked, "Isn't it better for our family to stay in the capital? Why do you want to go elsewhere?" Henry Black said, "There's a saying, serving the court is like serving a tiger. Victoria still harbors doubts about me, and I am not well treated by the descendants of the Queen family. It's better to stay away from the capital." Elizabeth responded, "You could try to get along better with my brothers." Henry Black said, "My younger sister is being imprisoned by Victoria in the heartbreak courtyard of the royal palace like a prisoner. How could I bear it? If I can't save her, then I can only choose to avoid facing it." Elizabeth couldn't argue with her husband and had no choice but to let it go. William Blade and his group encountered 3 people from Charles Justice outside the town of Simplified Words and invited them to join. Cindy Lee said, "You are a scholar. Instead of studying, why are you wandering around aimlessly?" Charles Justice replied, "I have decided to give up studying. Now, I only hope to find a martial arts master to learn from, so I can protect myself and help others." Philip Gale said, "Young man, you have ambition. You can join my Manhwa sect. In these chaotic times, the martial arts sects are bound to thrive." Charles Justice hesitated, but William Blade said, "You can take me as your master. I, William Blade, have wandered the world my entire life and met many talented young people, but none have impressed me except for you." Hearing this, Charles Justice was overjoyed and quickly said, "Master, I bow to you and accept you as my teacher." William Blade nodded in acceptance and said as they walked, "Now, I will teach you the first technique. See in all directions, hear in all directions." Charles Justice eagerly agreed, and William Blade added, "If you can't hear clearly while standing, you can lie down on the ground and press your ear to the surface to hear better." Charles Justice asked, "Really? Let me try." He immediately lay down, pressed his ear to the ground, and said, "Master, I hear the sound of many galloping horses ahead, and there are quite a lot of them." William Blade said, "Exactly. I see it too. A large group of riders is approaching from the west." Chapter 17. The Royal Palace Struggle. On the western official road of Simplified Town, near Luoyang City, a group of people was hurrying along the way. Suddenly, from the west, a large group of cavalry appeared, charging toward them. William Blade immediately said, "Everyone move aside." He quickly directed everyone to hide in the nearby forest, but their group was too large, and they had a carriage, so they couldn't completely conceal themselves. Cindy Lee said, "I'll go out and hold them off first. You all get ready for battle." Charles Justice quickly drew the sword from his waist. Philip Gale and the others were all dressed and armed with swords that Stevie Danielson had acquired from the Ministry of Punishments. Although Ethan Williams' wounds had not yet healed, he still gripped his sword tightly. Before long, the cavalry had arrived. The leader was a young man, around 20 years old, clad in armor, holding a horsewhip, and with a machete at his waist. The cavalry behind him was similarly dressed. Seeing that it was cavalry, Ethan Williams secretly breathed a sigh of relief. The leading rider, noticing people by the roadside, pulled the reins of his horse and waved his hand, signaling the cavalry behind him to stop as well. William Blade and Cindy Lee quickly stood in front of everyone. The leading rider looked at them and spoke. "Judging by your attire, you must be from the capital?" Cindy Lee nodded and replied, "May I ask which unit this general belongs to?" The young man responded loudly, "We are the Vanguard Cavalry Battalion under the command of General Li of Chang'an. We have been dispatched to Luoyang to guard the royal palace after joining the army." Hearing this, Cindy Lee was secretly alarmed. William Blade remained calm and said, "So, you are subordinates of the veteran General Li. It's an honor. We are on a mission, so we won't delay you. Please proceed ahead, General." The young man replied, "Thank you, then." After saying this, he led the cavalry onward. Once the cavalry had moved far away, William Blade said, "It seems the official road is not safe. We should switch to the waterway." "Edward," William said, "we plan to go to West Mountain to seek refuge with an old friend." Ethan Williams added, "I want to enlist under General Paul Levine. He is currently the Grand Marshal of the Great Zhou Army. We'll need to change our route and head north." William Blade said, "That works too. As long as we can get your family to safety, that's what matters. However, the roads heading north are not easy to travel. I originally planned to take the official road from Chang'an to Taiyuan." Cindy Lee said, "That's fine. Although the road is difficult, it's safer. But we cannot delay any longer. Let's get moving quickly." By evening, Henry Black and his family returned to Luoyang by carriage. This time, he entered the city through the southern gate. By nightfall, they had arrived at Robert Queen's residence. During dinner, his father-in-law asked, "Did you all have a good time today?" Elizabeth nodded and replied, "The warm weather has brought many people outside to enjoy the spring." Robert Queen added, "I heard from your uncle Arthur Queen that yesterday, when you went to the ancestral hall of the Wu family to pay respects, there was a conflict with his subordinates. Is that true?" Henry Black quickly responded, "Yes, they suspected our carriage was hiding someone, and were scolded by Uncle for their behavior." Wu someone chimed in, "Exactly, I never expected Uncle Wu's subordinates to be so arrogant, showing no respect even for father's reputation." Robert Queen said, "You must absolutely avoid confronting Arthur Queen. Right now, he is highly favored by your aunt, and he has gathered a group of informants under him who specialize in slander and false accusations. Getting involved with him will only bring trouble." Wu someone asked, "We're all part of the Wu family. Why doesn't father recruit people to stand against Uncle Wu?" Henry Black agreed, "Yes, we can't let him monopolize all the credit and fame." Robert Queen replied, "You're still too young to understand. Arthur Queen may be seen as a villain by the common people, officials, nobles, and even Victoria herself. But Victoria needs someone like him to handle certain affairs. Villains, however, rarely meet good ends." Henry Black said, "Given my unique position as a son-in-law, it's not appropriate for me to stay in the capital for too long. Therefore, I plan to take my family to Wusong tomorrow to assume my new post." Robert Queen remarked, "In that case, I won't stop you. Tomorrow, accompany me to the palace to bid farewell to Victoria." The next day, Henry Black followed his father-in-law to the palace. At the Martial Fortress Hall, they met Queen Victoria. Henry presented his intentions, and Victoria asked, "Why are you in such a rush to leave the capital? Have you caused some trouble?" Henry Black replied, "Your Majesty, with dark sorcery running rampant and unresolved grievances piling up in the capital, staying here too long might invite envy and suspicion due to my past misdeeds. It would be better for me to leave sooner rather than later." Hearing this, Queen Victoria nodded and said, "Very well. This time, as you take up the position of supervisor in Wusong, a relatively idle role. I want you to closely monitor the movements of Prince Luling and Fang Zhou. Can you do that? Startled by her words, Henry Black quickly responded, I understand, Your Majesty. Robert Queen excused himself and left. As he stepped out of the grand hall, he saw Princess Taiping entering with a group of female attendants. He quickly turned back and bowed respectfully to the princess. The leading female attendant looked somewhat familiar. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be Anna. Filled with questions, Robert refrained from asking and left the imperial palace. Princess Taiping entered the grand hall with her entourage, bowed to Queen Victoria, and said, Mother, Cousin Arthur Queen's influence is growing stronger. You must remain vigilant. Previously, the head female officer, Shang Yu, died in battle. I have since trained a capable warrior, Emily Williams, to serve as your left-hand protector and ensure your daily safety. Emily Williams stepped forward, bowed, and said, Your humble servant, Emily Williams, greets Queen Victoria. Benedict Monk, standing nearby, commented, That's a wise decision. With Confucius hiding in the mountains, and no skilled warrior by Queen Victoria's side, the danger has increased significantly. Queen Victoria replied, Sophia, you must quickly expand the influence of the Escher gang. Only when the Escher gang operates effectively can I feel at ease. Sophia Grace promptly agreed. Queen Victoria then asked, Has the leader of the gang still not emerged from seclusion? Sophia Grace quickly responded, He is expected to return soon. Queen Victoria continued, You should also carefully consider your marriage. If you don't favor Arthur Queen, then choose one of my nephews to be your consort. Sophia Grace nodded in agreement and excused herself. Benedict Monk then said, Queen Victoria, now that you have someone to protect you, I can focus entirely on overseeing the construction of Ming Hall. Queen Victoria replied, Good. I am eager to see what Ming Hall will ultimately look like. She then turned to Sophia Grace and said, Sophia, draft an edict on my behalf and send someone to Mount GC to invite Confucius out of seclusion. Sophia Grace promptly complied. At this moment, Arthur Queen hurried into the palace. After meeting with Queen Victoria, he said, Aunt, I received a secret report accusing Paul Levine of having private dealings with Arthur Wing. It's suspected they may be plotting rebellion. I request your permission to send someone to bring him in for interrogation. Queen Victoria pondered briefly and asked, Does the secret report include any witnesses or evidence? Arthur Queen quickly replied, Not yet, but once I interrogate him, the truth will come to light. Queen Victoria said, No need to rush. Currently, there are few capable military leaders left in the court. Paul Levine holds a minor position. Let him continue guarding Dajo to counter the disturbances from the Turkic soldiers. Arthur Queen, seeing Queen Victoria's decision, refrained from pressing further. Queen Victoria added, You requested my support, and I have already ordered 2,000 imperial guards from Chang'an to be placed under your command. They should be arriving in Luoyang soon. Arthur Queen, delighted, said, Thank you for your grace, Aunt. I will dedicate myself fully to serving you. Queen Victoria advised, Though you are working for the court, remind your subordinates to be cautious. The four-colored petition box has just been established. Proceed slowly. If things move too quickly, it might provoke rebellion. Arthur Queen immediately agreed and excused himself. At this moment, Sophia Grace said, Mother, while Cousin Arthur is loyal to you, we cannot guarantee that his subordinates won't misuse your name to commit unlawful acts. You must remain cautious. Queen Victoria replied, Sophia, don't worry about this. With the four-colored petition box, I can ensure they keep each other in check. You should focus on your own marriage instead. Sophia responded, Mother, I already have someone in mind. Queen Victoria, intrigued, asked, Oh, who is it? Tell me about him. Sophia Grace replied. I wonder if Her Majesty still remembers my cousin, Lionel Wu. He is a rather loyal and trustworthy person with noble character. Queen Victoria said. Really? Does the Wu family still have such descendants? Sophia Grace nodded and answered. It's just a pity that he is already married, and his first wife is still alive. Queen Victoria declared. If Sophia holds him in such high regard, leave it to me. Consider this matter settled. Just wait for my news. Sophia Grace quickly agreed. Queen Victoria stood up and said, You all follow me. Sophia, come along as well. Sophia Grace promptly obeyed, following Queen Victoria along with Benedict Monk and several maidservants. The Queen led the group to a rock garden in the Imperial Garden and nodded at Benedict Monk. Both Sophia Grace and the left Assistant Minister Williams felt uneasy. Benedict Monk stepped forward, pressed a spot on the rock garden, and immediately a stone door opened within it. He gestured and said, This way, Your Majesty. He then led the way ahead. Queen Victoria instructed, Aside from Plum Blossom, all the maidservants must withdraw. The maidservants and attendants quickly left as ordered. Plum Blossom stayed by Queen Victoria's side. The Queen entered through the stone door, revealing a stone pathway inside. Brass oil lamps were mounted on the walls on either side. Benedict Monk supported Queen Victoria's arm and said, Your Majesty, tread carefully, the path is slippery. Sophia Grace and the left Assistant Minister Williams hurriedly followed, stepping into the stone doorway. The group descended a winding stone staircase, the air growing colder with every step. After 100 steps, a massive jade screen appeared before them, intricately carved with the image of 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix. Queen Victoria, seeing this, nodded at Benedict Monk and said, You've done very well. This pleases me greatly. Everyone present was somewhat puzzled. Benedict Monk did not reply. He gently patted the image of a peacock, and immediately the screen shifted to one side, revealing a dense white mist emanating a cold, white light. Victoria Queen slowly stepped inside, seeing a white stone slab about 1.5 meters long and 1 meter wide. Through the swirling mist, 2 figures appeared, one a monk, the other a Taoist, seated upon it. Looking closely, these two were none other than eunuch Minhank and Taoist Red Crane. However, Minhank's hair had completely fallen out, making him resemble a great monk. Both individuals had their eyes tightly shut, leaving it unclear whether they were alive or dead. Victoria Queen asked, What is the condition of their injuries? Benedict Monk responded, Your Majesty, their injuries are no longer life-threatening. However, they are meditating here, recovering their inner strength. They are currently in a state of deep concentration and cannot come to pay their respects to Your Majesty. Victoria Queen nodded and said, Impressive. Your skills have improved significantly, surely thanks to their guidance. Benedict Monk nodded and replied, Your Majesty is wise. After losing his disciple, the Grand Steward turned to Buddhism and accepted me as his pupil. I have learned much martial arts from him. Victoria Queen nodded again and then turned to Sophia Grace, saying, I wonder how skilled the left Assistant Minister Williams, whom you trained for me, has become. Sophia Grace quickly replied, Your Majesty, I would never dare be careless with your safety. While the left Assistant Minister Williams' martial arts cannot compare to those of the Grand Steward or Taoist Red Crane, among the female officials, she is quite exceptional. Perhaps only the Supreme Guild leader could surpass her. Victoria Queen remarked, Your Uncle Benedict has recently learned a great deal of martial arts from these two masters. Let the two of them spar, so I may assess your abilities. Sophia Grace hastily responded, Although the left Assistant Minister Williams' martial arts are remarkable, she is still a servant. How could she dare to duel with Uncle Benedict? Victoria Queen countered, This is not the place for a contest. Let us go to the inner palace examination platform. Hearing this, Sophia Grace realized that her mother was resolute. She had no choice but to agree and followed her out. Hashtag Chapter 18. Episode 18. Each goes their own way. William Blade and the Williams family traveled westward along the official road, accompanied by Charles Justice, who was overjoyed to be in the company of Miss Williams, momentarily forgetting their current predicament. However, Miss Williams appeared sorrowful and unusually quiet. By evening, they reached the outskirts of Excianon County, where soldiers were stationed at the city gates, inspecting those entering and leaving. To ensure safety, William Blade instructed everyone to halt. Philip Gale said, "Senior brother, we have travel permits from Lord Robert Queen's office and are disguised as soldiers. We should be able to blend in," Edward Williams added. "News from the capital likely hasn't reached here yet," Ethan Williams suggested. "If worst comes to worst, we can force our way through," William Blade responded. "It seems Robert Rising still doesn't know we've disguised ourselves to escape Luoyang, but we must remain cautious. If necessary, we'll take the water route. However, it's a long way to Mangjin Wharf from here, so we'll have to take a chance. Everyone, stay calm and act on my signal." The group agreed. William Blade and his junior disciple led the way, while the Williams mother and daughter sat in the carriage. At the city gate, as expected, the guard stopped them for questioning. William Blade said, "We're from Lord Robert Queen's office in the capital, heading to the former capital of Chang'an on official business." He then handed over the travel permits. After inspecting the documents, one guard remarked, "These permits are only valid within Luoyang." William Blade immediately adopted a stern tone and said, "In the carriage are relatives of Lord Wu and also kin to Victoria of the current dynasty. We are under orders to escort them. If we're delayed here, can you bear the consequences?" The guard scrutinized the group, returned the permits, and allowed them to pass. William Blade quickly led everyone into the city. Charles Justice remarked, "Now we can relax." William Blade replied, "Not yet. We can't stay in Excianon for long. It's too close to the capital. Robert Rising will undoubtedly learn of our escape from Luoyang and send people to apprehend us, possibly even issuing a wanted notice." Edward Williams lamented, "If that's the case, my family will never know peace again." William Blade reassured him, "Don't worry. The world is vast, and there are many places to take refuge. For now, your family should head to West Mountain to find Victor Grace. We'll meet you there, and you can stay with General Nedongxue for a while." He then led the group out of Excianon before nightfall and found an inn outside the city to rest. The inn, named Excianon E, was bustling with travelers, including a few minor officials. William Blade paid for food and lodging for everyone. He also instructed the inn staff to prepare dry provisions and water. Later, he called Edward Williams, Droppy Lee, and his junior disciple to a secluded spot outside the inn to discuss their next steps. William Blade said, "Traveling in such a large group draws attention and slows us down. This won't work. We need to split up." Edward Williams said, "We're the ones causing trouble for you." Philip Gale interjected, "Don't say that, Mr. Williams. We promised General Nye to ensure your family's safety, and we'll see it through." Cindy Lee added, "If we keep going like this, we might miss Lord Shui." Edward Williams agreed, "Yes, our escape will surely implicate him." Cindy Lee suggested, "Why don't I take Mr. Williams on horseback to West Mountain to meet Lord Shui, and the rest of you follow later?" Edward Williams replied, "Mr. Lee, I may have escaped the Queens, but my body can't endure a long journey on horseback. If anything, take my son instead." William Blade noted, "Edward's injuries haven't fully healed, and a long journey would aggravate them." Philip Gale suggested, Then we could send Miss Williams with Mr. Lee. Cindy Lee hesitated. That might not be appropriate. Edward Williams countered. It's fine. Lord Chui is her fiancé, and my daughter isn't frail. After the discussion, William Blade said, The inn is crowded and full of prying eyes. We shouldn't stay long. Let's leave immediately. He turned to Droppy Lee and instructed, You go change into your night attire. Edward Williams, go and explain the situation to Miss Williams. My junior and I, along with the others, will head west slowly. Edward Williams returned to the inn and informed his wife and child about the matter. Worried, he said, Letting Sarah go with Mr. Lee might not be safe. Reluctantly, Edward added, But we're moving too slowly, and Ethan is injured. At this rate, we'll surely miss young Master Thoy. Sarah Williams interjected, Father, I can go. If you and Mother are concerned, Lily Carter can accompany me. Mrs. Williams hesitated, But we don't know much about Mr. Lee's background. Edward reassured her. Mr. Lee risked his life to save us from Robert Rising's clutches in the capital. This shows his strong sense of honor. Besides, he comes highly recommended by William Blade and his junior. There shouldn't be any problem. At the third watch of the night, Cindy Lee donned her night attire and arrived with William Blade outside the Williams family's room, gently knocking on the door. Edward Williams opened it promptly and said, We are ready. Let's set off now. Cindy Lee called for Sarah Williams, and William Blade escorted the two out of the inn to their horses. He then removed the black iron sword from his back and handed it to Miss Williams, saying, The road ahead is rugged and perilous. Mr. Lee has extensive experience in the martial world. You must follow his guidance. Take this sword for self-defense along the way. Sarah Williams took the sword, feeling its weight and the coldness seeping into her skin, which made her reluctant to let it go. Edward Williams said, With such a grand gift, how can our family possibly repay you? Cindy Lee added, This sword is extraordinary at first glance. It must have an exceptional origin. William Blade explained, This was found by my junior brother in the old Chang'an Palace and gifted to me. However, when you meet General Levine, you can lend it to Sean Lee for a while. This sword is too heavy and not suitable for a woman to use. When I have time, I'll find a master craftsman to forge a lighter sword for you. Sarah Williams hurriedly expressed her gratitude. William Blade urged, There's no time to waste. The two of you should set off immediately, and we'll follow shortly. Cindy Lee said, I'll leave markers along the way so we can meet at General Paul Levine's residence. With that, he mounted his horse. At that moment, Lily Carter and Ethan Williams arrived. Lily Carter said, Miss, I want to accompany you. Sarah Williams replied, If you follow me, I won't be able to move quickly. Lily Carter insisted, I cannot leave your side, Mississippi. Please allow me to come with you. Mrs. Williams also chimed in. That's right, take Lily Carter with you. She can care for you along the way. Sarah Williams extended her hand and pulled Lily Carter onto the horse. Cindy Lee warned, The road at night is difficult to traverse. Stay close and do not get separated. With that, he spurred his horse forward, and Sarah Williams quickly tugged the reins to follow. After seeing them off, William Blade said, Let's go as well. I've prepared dry rations and water in the carriage. You two can rest there for the night. The Williams couple nodded in agreement. Charles Justice and his servant were sound asleep when they were suddenly woken up. Rubbing his eyes, Charles saw it was his master and quickly asked, What happened? William Blade replied, Nothing. It's time to head out. Charles Justice looked out the window and said, But it's still dark. While packing up, William Blade explained, If we wait until daylight, it'll be too late. Charles Justice hurriedly woke Peter Justice, and together they stepped out of the inn, where they saw Philip Gale and the others waiting. As soon as they emerged, the group cracked their whips and began their journey. When Charles Justice woke up again, he found himself and Peter Justice lying in a carriage. Lady Williams said, "You two are finally awake. Must be starving, right? Here are some buns and water. Have a little something to eat." Peter Justice grabbed a bun and devoured it hungrily, while Charles Justice leaned out of the carriage. He saw William Blade, along with his fellow disciples, and the Williams father and son, riding horses to guard the carriage. He quickly asked, "Where is Miss Williams? Why don't I see her?" Philip Gale replied, "You just woke up? If you were the one protecting Miss Williams, would she still be alive?" Charles Justice's face immediately turned red. Edward Williams quickly interjected, "Young people sure sleep deeply." Ethan Williams added, "My sister has already gone ahead with Mr. Lee." Charles Justice was puzzled and asked, "Why did they go ahead instead of traveling with us?" William Blade answered, "They wanted to go ahead to find young Master Chue." Charles Justice fell silent, regret filling his heart. Philip Gale said, "We can take a small northern path east of Mean Chi. Once we cross the Yellow River, we'll reach West Mountain Territory." William Blade responded, "Yes, though it's a mountain road and slower, it's safer." Philip Gale added, "Let's find a place to rest here first. I'll write a letter to our sect disciples, asking them to meet us at Dezhou." After traveling a bit further, they changed to the northern path. At a fork in the road, they saw an arrow mark left by Cindy Lee. They then found a small roadside inn and stopped to eat. The innkeeper was a simple middle-aged man who, upon seeing their armor, broke into a nervous sweat and repeatedly addressed them as "My lords." William Blade removed his helmet and said, "Don't be afraid. We're just passing travelers. Once we finish eating, we'll leave. Bring out whatever food and drink you have. We'll pay you fairly." He then took out a string of coins and tossed it to the innkeeper. The old man, delighted at the sight of the money, hurriedly called his wife and son to serve food and wine. William Blade then asked, "Innkeeper, how do we get to West Mountain from here?" The innkeeper quickly replied, "Just follow this road, cross the mountain range, head north, and when you see the Yellow River, cross it to reach West Mountain Territory." William Blade nodded in thanks and added, "Please prepare some extra provisions and water for us to take along the way." The innkeeper eagerly agreed. After finishing their meal, the innkeeper said, "Dear sirs, your horses have been fed well. Please, you may now continue your journey." William Blade nodded and replied, "You are very considerate, innkeeper. Thank you." He then tossed a string of coins to the man. Charles Justice said, "Uncle Williams, please get on the carriage. I'll ride horseback instead." Edward Williams responded, "Ethan is still injured. Let him rest in the carriage." Ethan Williams quickly interjected, "I'm fine, really." William Blade said, "Both of you should ride in the carriage for now. When we reach the mountain path, the carriage might not be able to proceed." The father and son expressed their gratitude. Charles Justice helped Peter Justice onto a horse, and the group followed a narrow trail heading northward. By nightfall, they arrived at the base of a sprawling mountain range. The howls of wolves and cries of birds echoed from within, sending chills through everyone. Charles Justice worriedly remarked, "I fear there may be wolves in the mountains ahead. Perhaps we should wait until dawn to continue." Philip Gale replied, "Wolves aren't the real issue. I'm more concerned about encountering mountain bandits." Ethan Williams stepped out of the carriage, mounted a horse, and said, "Are we really afraid of bandits?" William Blade responded, "We may not fear them, but you're injured, and your parents shouldn't be frightened unnecessarily. If we do encounter bandits, try to avoid conflict." Ethan Williams nodded. "I'll follow your advice." William Blade instructed, "Stay vigilant. Traveling through mountain paths at night, speed isn't important, safety is. Everyone agreed. William Blade led Charles Justice and 2 others ahead to scout the path, while Philip Gale stayed with Ethan Williams to guard the carriage as they followed the winding mountain trail. When the path narrowed to accommodate only a single horse, William Blade ordered the group to halt. Edward Williams helped his wife out of the carriage and asked, "Can't the carriage go any further?" Ethan Williams replied, "It seems we'll have to abandon the carriage and continue on horseback." William Blade added, "We might even need to walk at some points. Be cautious, everyone." At that moment, they noticed numerous torches lighting up the mountain summit ahead, illuminating the rugged, uneven path. The road ahead was steep and treacherous, and shouts echoed from the group of people holding the torches. Ethan Williams quickly gripped his twin whips, shielding his father. William Blade signaled him to remain calm. Philip Gale stepped forward and raised his voice. "I am Philip Gale, head of the Huashan sect. We are merely passing through your territory tonight. I kindly ask you, noble men, to allow us safe passage." Suddenly, the voices of the people fell silent, and under the torchlight appeared terrifying, demonic faces. Charles Justice trembled with fear, but William Blade whispered, "Don't be afraid, they're just wearing masks." Chapter 19. The 19th episode, Escaping the Mountain Region. Late at night, traveling through the mountains is an extremely dangerous endeavor, especially without any light. This danger stems not only from external threats, but even more so from the fear within one's heart. Seeing a group of people carrying torches and wearing demonic masks, anyone in the martial world would feel a chill of fear. William Blade asked, "May I know who is leading this group?" One man removed his mask, revealing a sunburned face. Speaking in the Hunan dialect, he loudly said, "Seeing that you are military men, the road ahead is not suitable for carriages. You'd best take another path." William Blade clasped his hands and replied, "You must be the leader? We are in urgent need of reaching West Mountain. This is the shortcut, so we must pass through here. We hope you can accommodate us." The dark-faced man slowly descended the mountain, holding a torch. As he walked, he said, "If you gentlemen are in such a hurry, my brothers, and I can guide you to West Mountain. However," William Blade interrupted, "if the brave man has any requests, please speak. Money is not an issue." With that, he pulled out a 100-tael silver ingot from his chest and offered it. The crowd on the mountain, seeing the silver, immediately cheered. The dark-faced man approached, glanced at the ingot, and waved his hand to signal the others to quiet down. Instantly, the mountain fell silent. He took the silver ingot and said, "We mountain folk have never seen such a large piece of silver before. The road to West Mountain is a treacherous mountain path. Are you truly willing to take such a risk?" William Blade lowered his head in thought. The man continued, "How about this? Why don't you gentlemen rest at my home for the night? Set out again tomorrow morning. What do you think?" Philip Gale added, "That works. Traveling at night is slow and far too dangerous." William Blade said to the man, "Thank you for your kind offer, but we need to discuss before making a decision." The dark-faced man replied, "Of course. I, the old man Danielson, also known as Courage, will wait for your decision." As he spoke, he fiddled with the silver ingot and muttered, "I wonder what this thing is used for." William Blade immediately gathered everyone behind the carriage to discuss in hushed tones. Ethan Williams asked, "Can we trust these people?" Edward Williams, also concerned, added, "Could they be highway robbers?" William Blade responded, "These people's background is unclear, so we must remain cautious. However, what Courage Danielson said isn't entirely unreasonable. With my martial skills and my junior brothers, these people wouldn't stand a chance against us." Philip Gale remarked, "That's true, but I'm afraid they might resort to trickery." William Blade made up his mind and said, "Here's what I think. We'll use our identity as soldiers to intimidate them for now. Then my junior brother and I will take turns standing guard at night. The rest of you must stay vigilant and not sleep too deeply. At dawn, we'll leave." Everyone agreed. William Blade then turned to the dark-faced man and said, "Brother Danielson, we've discussed it. We'll accept your suggestion to stay at your place for the night. At dawn, we'll continue our journey." Courage Danielson, hearing this, ordered his men to stand down. They all removed their masks, revealing rugged mountain folk faces. He led the way along the mountain path, crossing a ridge and descending a short distance to reach a small, impoverished mountain village. Courage Danielson brought them into his stone house and asked his wife and neighbors to prepare food. Ethan Williams helped his parents sit down to rest, and then sat silently on a small stool. Courage Danielson seemed somewhat wary of him. William Blade removed his helmet, revealing his white hair and beard. Courage Danielson, puzzled, asked, "Sir, at your age, are you still serving in the military? You must be a veteran general then?" William Blade asked, "What is this place? How far is it to West Mountain?" Courage Danielson said, "Our small village is called Bantha Village. From here, if you follow the mountain road northward, after 3 more days, you will reach South Village. Beyond South Village lies the Yellow River, but there is no bridge over the Yellow River, only a small ferry." William Blade said, "Brother Justice send someone to South Village immediately and ask them to find a slightly larger ferry. We need to get both people and horses across the Yellow River." Courage Danielson looked troubled and said, "Is it really that urgent?" William Blade replied, "The sooner, the better. If we delay, the Turkic army will attack, and by then, this place might also face disaster." Startled by his words, Courage Danielson quickly called his son over, instructing him to bring a torch, some dry food, and water, and to head to South Village at once. William Blade added, "Let my disciple go with him. They can ride ahead on horseback, which will be faster." Charles Justice seemed somewhat reluctant upon hearing this. William Blade said, "This is your test." As he spoke, he took a small dagger from his chest and handed it to Charles Justice. "Take this for self-defense. Once you've arranged the ferry, come back to pick us up." Courage Danielson also gave his son a few instructions. Charles Justice led the horse, while Peter Justice, who was munching on a bun, wanted to join them. William Blade said, "You stay here. He will come back after arranging the ferry." Charles Justice mounted the horse and pulled Josh Danielson, Courage Danielson's son, up with him. Their family dog followed along. After finishing their meal, Courage Danielson prepared hot water for everyone. Once they soaked their feet, Edward Williams and his wife rested in the guest room, while Ethan Williams sat on a chair keeping watch by the door. Outside the door, the 2 senior brothers, William Blade and Philip Gale, were talking in hushed tones. Philip Gale asked quietly, "Senior brother, why did you let Charles Justice go to South Village with that person? Aren't you worried they might encounter danger along the way?" William Blade said, "I've also heard that the mountain villagers are fierce, but I guess it's just for wealth. This young man knows the way, and Charles Justice has also memorized the route. We must quickly leave Hunan territory, or Lord Robert Rising will send people after us. Once we cross the Yellow River, we'll be safe." Courage Danielson saw him, and was so frightened that his hands trembled, causing the knife to drop to the ground. Ethan Williams drew his double clubs and fiercely said, "You've finally revealed your true colors. I'll send you to the afterlife." With that, he raised the bronze clubs, aiming to strike the man's head. Courage Danielson, terrified, crawled on the ground, unable to speak. Suddenly, an iron sword flew in through the window, intercepting the double clubs. Philip Gale quickly stepped in and said, General Williams, do not wrongfully kill an innocent man. He then helped Courage Danielson to his feet. Ethan Williams, puzzled, asked, if he didn't intend to kill, why was he sharpening the knife? Philip Gale replied, he was sharpening the knife for something else. A knife like that is too small to kill us. Courage Danielson hurriedly gathered himself and said, I was sharpening the knife to slaughter a chicken as a farewell gesture for you all. I wouldn't dare harbor any intent to kill. Philip Gale helped him sit down, picked up his iron sword, and then pulled Ethan Williams outside. Hearing the commotion, William Blade entered from outside and quickly stepped forward to comfort Courage Danielson. Outside the room, Philip Gale said, Edward, I understand that the recent tragedy in your household has been a huge blow to you, but we cannot let suspicion get the better of us, nor can we use this as an excuse to wrongfully kill innocent people. Ethan Williams then tucked the double clubs back into his sleeves. At dawn, the villagers all gathered, each bringing food, soup, meat, and fish to bid them farewell. An old man even brought homemade wine for the send-off. William Blade expressed his gratitude to them. Courage Danielson arranged for a young man named Logan to guide them. Philip Gale said, we won't be using our carriage anymore. You can dismantle it, tie it to your oxen, and use it to carry goods back to the county town. The mountain villagers, hearing this, quickly expressed their thanks. Following Logan's guidance, the group crossed several moderately steep mountains. However, the road ahead became increasingly difficult. During a rest, Logan said, you soldiers are truly seasoned warriors. We've traveled very quickly, and can reach South Village in just one day. However, the road northward is even harder to traverse. Edward Williams asked skeptically, if the mountain paths are this difficult, how do the people of South Village travel to the county town? Logan replied, they climb the mountains. For the people of South Village, a quick trip to the county town takes 10 days, while a slow one can take half a month. After resting, Logan led everyone across a mountain range to a small village called Gillian Mora, where they stayed overnight. Early the next morning, Charles Justice arrived, panting heavily, leading his horse to rejoin the group. After the villagers offered him food and drink, William Blade asked about his business. Charles Justice replied, Master Lee has escorted Miss Williams across the Yellow River. Josh Danielson is steering a large boat upstream. I hurried back to report the news to you all. Philip Gale remarked, I wonder if there are any large boats available. The mountain villager hosting them said, don't worry. At the White Wave Dock, there are large boats. As long as you pay them, the boats will travel downstream along the Yellow River and quickly reach South Village. Ethan Williams's family felt reassured upon hearing this. After eating and resting briefly, Logan led the group onward again. However, the road ahead became extremely treacherous, forcing them to lead their horses on foot. Edward Williams managed to endure the journey, but Lady Williams struggled. Ethan Williams then said, Mother, let me carry you. Lady Williams replied, but your wounds haven't healed yet. How could I let you carry me? Charles Justice interjected, Elder Brother Williams's injuries are not healed. Let me carry Lady Williams instead. With that, he stepped forward and carried her. Ethan Williams quickly expressed his gratitude. William Blade said, when walking on uneven terrain, keep your mind balanced, plant your saws firmly on the ground, apply equal force with both legs, maintain your center of gravity, and clear your mind of distractions. Peter Justice, confused, asked, what does that mean? Philip Gale explained, that's my senior brother teaching you the principles of Lightfoot technique, a method for moving while carrying heavy loads. Logan continued to lead the way, and by nightfall, they reached the South Village ferry dock. Josh Danielson had been waiting for them for a long time. Seeing them arrive, he was overjoyed. However, the ferryman was a burly man wearing tattered clothes, his chest bare, and his voice rough. He said, "With so many people and horses, it'll cost 20 taels of silver to cross the river. Pay up front, and I'll take you across. Do you agree?" Josh Danielson retorted. "It's such a short distance, yet you're asking for 20 taels of silver?" "Ferryman Sai, you're being unreasonable." Ferryman Sai replied, "If they don't want to pay, they can go find a cheaper boat elsewhere." William Blade pulled down the plank, letting Ethan Williams board the boat first. The ferryman, Sai, was startled upon seeing him and quickly gripped the rudder tightly. Philip Gale said, "Money is not an issue, as long as you get us across the river safely." With that, he pulled out a 10-tael silver ingot from his sleeve, tossed it to the ferryman, and continued, "Here's 10 taels in advance. Once we've all crossed, you won't be short a single coin of the remaining amount." The group split into two. Ethan Williams, along with Charles Justice and Peter Justice, crossed the river first. Sai then ferried the two brothers, William Blade and another, across. Finally, only the horses were left. Seeing the strong, well-fed horses, Sai's greed flared up. He loaded all the horses onto the boat and let it drift downstream along the Yellow River. The group waiting on the riverbank saw this and immediately began shouting angrily. Sai, full of smugness, made mocking faces at them from the boat. Ethan Williams, furious, said, "We've come all this way, only to be betrayed on the Yellow River. That scoundrel got away with it." William Blade said nothing. Gathering his inner energy, he leaped into the air, his feet lightly touching the riverbank as his body glided over the water, chasing after the boat. The group on the shore grew anxious for him. Sai, seeing this, panicked and rowed faster, letting the boat drift further downstream. William Blade nearly landed on the boat but missed, and was about to fall into the Yellow River. Once again, William Blade gathered his energy, his feet skimming the water lightly. Propelling himself forward, he finally landed on the boat. Chapter 20. The Second Encounter, Victoria's Protection. Lightfoot martial arts must be practiced from a young age. One begins by running or climbing with weights, and once the skill is mastered, the weights are removed, allowing one to move swiftly as if flying, light as a swallow. Combined with inner energy cultivation, walking on water becomes an achievable feat. The group waiting on the northern bank of the Yellow River had trusted Sai to ferry their horses across. However, Sai, tempted by greed at the sight of the large and sturdy horses, decided to steal them. Relying on his decades of experience navigating the Yellow River, he turned the rudder and let the boat drift downstream. William Blade, realizing Sai's intentions, immediately leaped into action, using his Lightfoot skill to board the boat. Sai, seeing the old man step onto the boat as if walking on water, turned pale. But at this point, he steeled himself. Pulling a hatchet from behind his back, he held it menacingly and coldly said, "You brought this upon yourself. Don't blame me for taking your life." With that, he abandoned the rudder and swung the hatchet toward William Blade. William Blade let out a cold laugh and said, "Your greed knows no bounds. Do you think you can swallow an elephant whole? Your avarice will be your downfall. Steer this boat back to the shore, and I may yet spare your life." As he spoke, he sidestepped the hatchet, leaped to the bow, grabbed the rudder, and began steering the boat back toward the northern bank of the Yellow River. Sai's eyes turned bloodshot, veins bulging on his forehead. Seeing his attack miss, he roared in anger, "You wretched old man! I'll send you to meet the river god." As the words were spoken, the sword swung again. William Blade remained motionless, gripping the helm with both hands and steering the boat slowly toward the shore. Seeing the attacker strike again, he aimed a side kick at the man's abdomen, landing squarely on Sailor Sai's chest. William Blade, with his towering frame, delivered a blow so powerful that it sent Sailor Sai tumbling backward, crashing into the front legs of a horse. Startled, the horses reared up on their hind legs, causing chaos as one kicked the ferryman into the river. The boat, which carried 5 horses, erupted into disorder, with the other horses whinnying loudly. William Blade quickly steadied the helm, grabbing the reins with one hand while firmly holding the wheel with the other, gradually guiding the boat to the shore. Philip Gale and the others rushed forward to secure the boat. Charles Justice and Ethan Williams hurriedly grabbed the reins, leading all the war horses safely onto the bank. William Blade leaped from the boat to the shore and said, "Everyone can continue the journey now." With that, he mounted his horse, and the others followed suit. Edward Williams and his wife shared a horse, while Charles Justice and Peter Justice did the same. The group, led by William Blade, rode along the narrow northern path. At Arthur Queen's residence in the Clear Peace district of Luoyang, Robert Rising brought Mark Smith and George Freeman to report the situation to their superior. Smarty adjusted his attire and said, "I led the team out of Luoyang to investigate discreetly. According to our men at the West Gate, Henry Black left with a large group, splitting into 2 carriages as they departed Luoyang. However, they never returned. Upon further inquiry at the Xianan County Post Station, we discovered that Edward Williams and his associates had already left last night." Arthur Queen raised a hand to interrupt the report, took a sip of tea, and said, "Do you know why Edward Williams and his family managed to escape?" The officials exchanged nervous glances. Robert Rising quickly spoke up. "It's entirely my fault for failing in my duties and allowing them to flee." Arthur Queen waved dismissively and said, "The fault doesn't lie with you, but with our lack of a private army. You are minor officials. On ordinary days, you can apprehend commoners or low-ranking officials. But when faced with suspects skilled in martial arts, there's nothing you can do. Currently, we don't have many people proficient in martial arts here." Everyone nodded in agreement. George Freeman, the only one among them skilled in martial arts and a veteran from the battlefield, lifted his head proudly. Arthur Queen looked at him and said, "I've requested reinforcements from Victoria. Troops have arrived. My aunt has dispatched 2,000 cavalrymen from Chang'an to assist us in capturing the fugitives." The news delighted everyone. Arthur Queen then commanded, "George Freeman, step forward and receive your orders." Arthur Queen pulled a military token from his sleeve and handed it to George Freeman, who stood ready to take the command. "This is the token for the 2,000 cavalrymen. I appoint you as the general of the cavalry battalion, responsible for tracking and capturing the fugitives." George Freeman accepted the order with gratitude. Arthur Queen continued, "Robert Rising, you and George Freeman will immediately lead 100 cavalrymen to West Mountain. You must intercept and eliminate Edward Williams and his family outside the city of Dashang. If they manage to join Paul Loving's forces, it will become extremely difficult to deal with them." Robert Rising promptly agreed and departed with George Freeman. Arthur Queen then summoned Smarty and asked, "Has Henry Black and his family left the capital yet?" Smarty hurriedly nodded in agreement. Arthur Queen then said, "Leonard Stone, take my decree, lead the 5 Tigers of Luoyang, and take over Robert Rising's duties. Continue handling the Illumination prison case." Leonard Stone quickly acknowledged and departed. In the Imperial Palace's rear garden, Victoria Queen sat on a chaise longue, with Sophia Grace on either side awaiting orders. Palace maid Maihoa stepped forward and loudly announced, "Please select your weapons. The sparring match is about to begin." The monk, Benedict Monk, casually picked up a wooden staff, confidently eyeing the female official across from him. Despite her wearing female armor, he felt no fear. The left Assistant Minister Williams unsheathed her sword, clasped her hands, and said, "Then I shall borrow the way." With that, she charged straight toward the monk's bald head. Benedict Monk swiftly sidestepped, swinging his wooden staff horizontally to block the blade. The first move was often not executed with full force, and since the opponent was a woman, Benedict Monk underestimated her slightly. The left assistant Minister Williams missed her first strike and immediately spun around to deliver another slash, which was again blocked by the wooden staff. Victoria Queen remarked, "Do not hold back. I want to see your true skills." At that moment, the leader of the Commerce Guild entered with her female officials, paying respects to Victoria Queen. The Queen signaled for her to stand aside before turning her attention back to the sparring match. The left assistant Minister Williams suddenly increased her attack speed, her sword movements growing faster and forming a flurry of blade shadows before the monk. Benedict Monk no longer dared to be complacent, focusing intently on the onslaught. With both hands wielding his wooden staff, he successfully parried every sword strike. He was originally a wandering medicine seller, with a robust physique and a few years of martial arts training. Now, under the guidance of Minhan and Zich Ha, his martial arts skills had significantly improved. His lower stance was very stable, forcing his opponent to reduce their attacks, though their strength increased, leaving the wooden staff riddled with slash marks. The left assistant Minister Williams, seeing the upper sect leader, was startled. He shouted loudly, slashing down with both hands, certain that the opponent's wooden staff would be split in two. Unexpectedly, Benedict Monk shifted his body, dodging the blade, and turned his hand to strike the flat side of the blade with the wooden staff. The left assistant Minister Williams felt a numbness in his tiger's mouth, causing his long sword to slip from his grasp. Simultaneously, there was a crack sound, and upon looking again, the opponent's wooden staff was also broken. Victoria Queen said, "The true skills of both of you have yet to be displayed. All those assassins who attempted to harm me were supreme masters." The upper sect leader softly replied, "This place is too cramped. They fear that fully displaying their abilities might harm Victoria." Victoria Queen said, "You don't need to worry about me. Just unleash your full abilities." Both had lost their weapons, and were scolded by Victoria. Benedict Monk let out a loud shout, channeling his strength into both hands. He grabbed a stone table weighing hundreds of pounds, lifted it high above his head, and glared at the left assistant Minister Williams. With a forceful motion, he hurled the table toward his opponent. The onlookers were horrified. The left assistant Minister Williams, seeing the flying table, quickly leaped into the air, stepped onto the table mid-flight, and suddenly drew a long sword from her sleeve. Using all her strength, she stabbed the sword into the table. The moment the stone table hit the ground, it shattered into countless pieces. The Supreme Clan leader hurriedly shielded Victoria, but one of the eunuchs nearby leaped into the air, swung his dust whisk, and caught a piece of stone, throwing it back to the ground. Victoria Queen clapped her hands, signaling them to stop, and said, "At last, I've seen your true skills." The left assistant Minister Williams quickly sheathed her sword, picked up her saber, clasped her hands, and said to Benedict Monk, "I concede." With that, she stepped back. Benedict Monk was secretly astonished. He hadn't expected that his opponent, being a woman, possessed such exceptional martial arts skills. Victoria Queen said, "Very well, with you protecting me, I can feel at ease." Emily Williams, left assistant minister of the Supreme Clan, stepped forward to receive my command. The left assistant minister Williams immediately knelt to listen. Victoria Queen said, "From now on, you and the Supreme Clan leader will directly follow my orders and handle the tasks I assign. Keep this token with you at all times." The left assistant minister Williams promptly accepted the token, expressed her gratitude, and withdrew. Victoria Queen then stood up and returned to the Immortal City Palace. Benedict Monk stepped forward and said, "Now that Victoria is well protected by them, I can leave without worry. I wish Victoria good health." Victoria Queen replied, "Go, and make sure to complete the construction of the Hall of Light." The Supreme Leader saw him leave and immediately stepped forward, saying, "Reporting to Victoria, the envoy Lu Husu whom I sent to investigate Tianshan has returned." Queen Victoria immediately signaled her not to speak further and then asked Wenda Li, "Have you been to Heartbreak Courtyard recently?" Wenda Li was startled and quickly replied, "Reporting to the Empress Mother, Wenda has been busy selecting a consort and handling matters related to the left Assistant Minister Williams, so I have not visited Heartbreak Courtyard recently." Queen Victoria said, "You and Gracie shall go to Heartbreak Courtyard and bring Rosie Black and her mother to meet me." Wenda Li hurriedly complied, took her leave with Lady Gracie, and headed to Heartbreak Courtyard. Queen Victoria then ordered everyone else to withdraw, leaving only the Supreme Sect Leader, and said, "What's the situation in Tianshan?" The Supreme Sect Leader replied in a low voice, "Your Majesty, according to Envoy Liu Yu's report, Tyler Black is focused on martial arts training in Tianshan and seems to have no intention of returning to the Central Plains." Queen Victoria said, "If that's the case, Rosie Black will remain imprisoned indefinitely. I assigned you to investigate the matter of the Golden Sun Wheel. Have you discovered anything?" The Supreme Sect Leader responded, "I have searched through all the martial arts sects and only heard that when Your Majesty achieves great success, the Golden Sun Wheel will emerge." Queen Victoria nodded. "That aligns with Kong Jun's words. What is the situation with Prince Lu Ling in Fangzhou?" The Supreme Leader replied, "Your Majesty Victoria, Prince Lu Ling in Fangzhou is in a state of severe decline and shows signs of wanting to commit suicide. However, with consort by present, Prince Lu Ling will be fine." Queen Victoria nodded and asked, "Continue monitoring. Is Kong Quan still hiding in Mount Kasi?" The Supreme Leader responded, "I have already met with Master Kong. Currently, he is constructing a massive array, preparing to lure the traitorous Lucas Sage into it, and then trap and eliminate him." Queen Victoria nodded. "Very well. You may withdraw. Remember, do not engage directly with Arthur Queen's subordinates." The Supreme Leader quickly obeyed. Not long after, Rosie Black finished bathing, changed into a palace maid's attire, and brought her daughter along to follow Gracie and Princess Taiping back to the Immortal City Palace. At that moment, Queen Victoria was lying on a soft bed while the imperial physician, Shinan Lu, massaged her. Sophia Grace softly said, "Mother, Rosie Black has brought her daughter." Rosie Black hurriedly pulled her daughter down to kneel before Queen Victoria. The 1-year-old girl had a pale complexion from lack of sunlight, wore oversized clothes, and knelt blankly on the ground. Queen Victoria kept her eyes closed and coldly said, "Your brother John is still alive. Did you know?" Hearing this, Rosie Black felt both shocked and elated but did not respond. Sophia Grace secretly worried for her. Queen Victoria continued, "Out of consideration for you being the sister of the Queen family's consort, I will spare your life, but—" At this point, she opened her eyes, looking at the little girl kneeling below, and asked, "What is her name? How old is she?" Rosie Black quickly replied, "Your Majesty, this is the daughter of your servant and Prince Lu Ling. Her name is Little Ling, and she is 1 year and 3 months old." Queen Victoria said, "You must part with your daughter. She is of royal blood. Hand her over to the palace maids responsible for raising royal descendants." Hearing this, Rosie Black was terrified and quickly looked toward Sophia Grace. Palace maid Manhwa hurriedly ran in and said, "Your Majesty, Chief Steward Chan and Supervisor Mu of Yisun Palace are waiting outside the door." Queen Victoria said, "Summon them in." Manhwa obeyed, and soon a eunuch and a palace maid entered. After giving Rosie Black a reassuring glance, Sophia Grace turned her attention to the 2 newcomers. The 2 knelt to pay their respects to Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria asked, "Are all the royal descendants in good health?" 2 people hurriedly responded. Steward Williams, a senior palace maid over 30 years old, replied softly. Regarding the matter of the royal grandson, this servant dares not be negligent. Apart from restricting their freedom, everything else follows Victoria's orders. Victoria Queen said, "Take this little girl away now." The two quickly obeyed, immediately approaching to carry little Ling. Seeing this, the little girl burst into tears. Rosie Black hurriedly embraced her child, whispering a few words softly. The little girl stopped crying immediately, then left her mother's arms, and was carried away by the palace maids, departing from Immortal City Palace. Chapter 21, Reunion on the Official Road. William Blade led everyone to continue along the mountain path heading north. Upon spotting a symbol left by Cindy Lee on a rock face by the road, he said, "This area is still mountainous, and we've left Hunan territory. Although it's much safer here, we shouldn't linger too long. We must quickly reach Daizhou." The mountain path, while not easy to traverse, was manageable thanks to their horses, allowing them to maintain a decent pace. Charles Justice, however, couldn't help but worry about Miss Williams. During a quiet moment, he asked his master, William Blade, about the true identity of Mr. Lee. William Blade replied, "To the west of the Tang Empire, near Jade Gate Pass, there's a place called Sama Ghost Fortress. Its lord is a mysterious martial arts master. Mr. Lee was rescued by this fortress lord, who later arranged for him to learn advanced swordsmanship. Cindy Lee is also highly skilled. With her accompanying Miss Williams, there's no need to worry." Hearing this, the Williams family and Charles Justice felt much more at ease. By nightfall, the group arrived in Pingla City, where they found an inn to rest. After dinner, as everyone prepared to sleep, Charles Justice heard a knock at his door. Opening it, he saw William Blade, who said, "Come, let me take you out for a walk." Charles Justice quickly responded, "All right, where are we going?" Peter Justice chimed in, "Young master, I want to go too." Charles Justice lightly tapped Peter on the head and said, "Master is taking me out for something important. Why would you tag along and make noise? Stay in the room and sleep like a good boy." William Blade added, "Disciple, since you've taken me as your master, I will not only teach you martial arts, but also share with you the wisdom of life on the road." Charles Justice immediately agreed. The master and disciple left the inn and strolled through the streets of the small town for a while before stopping in front of a large house. William Blade stepped forward and knocked on the door. An elderly servant opened it, looking surprised to see him, but still invited them inside. The house was modest, featuring 3 tiled rooms with a lantern hanging by the front door. The servant led them to the main hall, invited them to sit and wait, and then left. As the two sat down, Charles Justice couldn't help but ask, "Master, what is this place?" William Blade said, "This is the house of a friend of my master. When you meet the owner later, don't talk too much." Charles Justice quickly agreed. Shortly after, an old servant brought 3 cups of tea, followed by a middle-aged man in a blue robe. He opened his mouth and said, "Mr. Lee stopped by here the other day and mentioned that you would come later. You weren't slow to arrive." William Blade led his disciple to stand up and clasp his hands in greeting, saying, "Brother Danielson, I've come to trouble you once again." Master Danielson clasped his hands in return and invited them to sit down, saying, "If it weren't for circumstances beyond my control, I would also wish to roam the world with you, brother, traveling far and wide. Was your journey peaceful?" William Blade replied, "The journey was fairly smooth," then lowered his voice and said, "I suppose you've already heard about the Williams family. The world is unpredictable." Master Danielson sighed and said, "Indeed. To think that back in the day, we were all from prominent families. Even several emperors after the founding of the Tang dynasty showed us respect. Who would have thought that ignorant youngsters would dare to target us now? William Blade took a sip of tea and said, Currently, the Queen's is in power, and secret accusations are rampant. In smaller regions, it's not so apparent, but in the capital, everyone lives in fear. Most of those who've suffered are prominent families and mid-level officials. Master Danielson let out a bitter laugh and said, That's right. Nearly all the important ministers and generals in the court have been eliminated. William Blade consoled him. This matter requires discretion. Eventually, it will come to an end. Old Master Danielson nodded in agreement, then looked at Charles Justice and said, This young man carries an extraordinary aura. May I ask where you are from? William Blade replied, This is my newly accepted disciple, Charles Justice. He is a student at the Imperial Academy, but has little interest in studying and admires Mason Stark instead. Seeing his solid foundation, I decided to take him under my wing. He has not been my disciple for long. He then turned to Charles Justice and said, This is a good friend of your master, Stevie Danielson. Charles Justice quickly stood up, clasped his hands, and